Welcome to the Bobocast. I'm your host, Andy. We got a cool show for you guys today. I've been kind of refining the shows, making it fit into what I want it to be so I can have a chat with some other Potterheads and Potterheads to be, explaining what Harry Potter series is all about, why it's so magical and wonderful for those of us who enjoy it, and a little more in-depth analysis about some of the characters and writing style of how this world has been constructed. So take a listen to this week's Bobocast. But I want to throw a little sponsored message out there. If you or your business is interested in sponsoring the Bobocast, we do accept Muggle currency and Muggle-owned and operated partners. You can inquire further at bobocast@gmail.com. But today's Bobocast is brought to you by Cackling Cedars from the herbologists at Upper Flagley, the wonderful wizards that bred over the centuries the Whomping Willow variety of tree, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, as it is a famous landmark at the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in Scotland. But these are cackling cedars. They chuckle, they laugh, they respond to tickles. They do all sorts of wonderful things. Not nearly as violent, a calmer, smaller variety of tree, a little easier to clean up in your yard as well. So if you're interested, you check out those Upper Flagley herbologists and get your cackling cedar today. Good afternoon, morning, day, evening, whatever it happens to be for you. I hope it's going well. And I'm doing great. I had a good week putting together this show, making it very Harry Potter centric, working up the Twitter account, getting some followers at Bobocast at twitter.com. If you can do me a favor, and if you know anybody who loves the Harry Potter, have them follow me. I tweet Harry Potter this and that throughout the day, as well as updates on this very, very program. Today we've got a few things for you. Got some listener mail, got some discussion of two of our other main characters, especially for movie 7 that's coming out this summer, movie 7 part 2. You'll need to know who these two characters are, why they're important, and as well as talking about who they are and what they're about. What I'm going to do is kind of talk about their progression in the books and how they've changed over time, and how J.K. Rowling, the author, wrote them in as really interesting characters that we've come to love and appreciate and be a part of the show. Before we do that, the trivia at the end of last week's show was, what is Professor Flitwick's first name? So Professor Flitwick is the charmed professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I hope you got it. I hope you knew it. And if you didn't, now you do. It is Filius, F-I-L-I-U-S, Filius Flitwick, as mentioned in Book 7 of Harry Potter, the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. So there you go, Filius Flitwick. Now you do. You're much smarter. You're much more trivia oriented. And I got another good one for you at the end of this week's program. But let's jump into some listener mail. This listener writes in, I guess one thing that nobody has really been able to explain to me is why Harry Potter is so fascinating. Because frankly, every time I watch some of it on TV, I just get really bored. Well, honestly, that is a legitimate criticism and a legitimate question. Because when I first was exposed to this series, I really questioned it as well. Now, I grew up, when I was a kid, I'm older, I'm 31, so I was in high school, late high school, when I started reading Harry Potter, and I didn't grow up with it quite as a child. So these were never kids' books to me. I was never the same age as the characters, although Harry Potter is born in the same year I was born. So they were kind of like my age growing up throughout the 80s and 90s, but 10 years later, weird. Anyways, but not related. What's interesting is a lot of people who are really into it, the younger generation that's into it, maybe 10 years younger than me and younger, is they've actually grown up with it since they were little kids. And so these are stories that have been read to them that were interesting and mature enough for them to handle, adventurous, and it wasn't just, little kids' books anymore. It was full-on novels. And so that when they grew up, they were able to transition into full-time reading. And so that's one of the reasons that generation really has grabbed onto this series. But then what about older people? Why would older people become so interested and fascinated by this world of Harry Potter? Now, there's a lot of reasons, but the main one that I subscribe to is that the way it is written, the method of how the stories are put into place was just very engaging. So the first half of the first book is pretty much just world building. If you think about traditional sci-fi or traditional fantasy, a lot of what's in those books is describing the world. Now, in traditional fantasy or sci-fi world, that's all super out there weird stuff. But in Harry Potter, it's all normal stuff, just with a little bit of magic involved. So the wizards that are in Harry Potter, they're not totally ethereal, wacko weirdos that are just on another dimension. They're very much based in the real world. They just happen to use magic to do the dishes. They happen to use magic to unlock doors. They do use magic to levitate items. So as you're reading this, and you kind of imagine what it would be like to be at a school of wizardry, they're doing all the fun things that you would do and have to do to learn magic. Now, that's the first book. If that pulls you in and you get excited about that in the slightest, then the rest of the world makes a lot of sense on that level. So the world is totally consistent, and it makes a lot of sense. And there's fun things like, what's an example? Like werewolves. They'll explain these sort of mythological constructs that we have, like werewolves or unicorns or dragons, in the context of wizards. And they explain like why we don't see them anymore, but why they still exist. And it fits into this subversive kind of world that might actually exist. So it's just a lot of good fun, and it was a very good imaginative world. And then once you carry that out and through and really complete that, then the world turns into a very cool place. Our listener says, frankly, every time I watch some of it on TV, I just get really bored. Well, that's the problem, is the movies, especially the first two movies, the first movie, the fourth, fifth, and sixth movie are all terrible. They're really bad movies because they're designed to do something very specific, and not all designed to do the same thing. And that thing that they're designed to do is not designed to capture new audience members. So this reader is watching movie number one. It's like, this is a stupid little kids movie, which it is. It is for little kids. It's a children's movie. There's a lot of like rising, swelling music and trying to get the glamour of this kind of impressive school involved, and a lot of close-ups on, if you watch the movie, there's a lot of close-ups on Daniel Radcliffe's face of him being astonished. Like, he's just, wow, whoa, oh, the whole time. And that's because it's designed for children. So don't, if you're looking to get into Harry Potter and catch up, don't start on movie number one. Now, differently but still terrible movies are movie number 4, 5, and 6. And that's because by the time we get into books 4, 5, and 6, there is a ton of information and plot. There are all sorts of different characters, casts of characters, varying sort of alignments and good and evil, and how people are partnering up in different groups. And that's all described in a very wonderful way in terms of alliances and discussion and dialogue and actions and behaviors throughout those 3 books in particular. But you just can't portray that in a movie. So book number 4, I have right here, my copy is over 700 pages long. Book number 5 my copy is over 850 pages long. And I don't have 6, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 pages. And 7 is over 700 pages as well. So especially those last 4 books, there's so much that they had to pack a ton into the movies. And when you do that, then you, especially in the movies, then all you get is essential plot points. So essential plot point number 1 through 8, and then the movie's over. And you lose a lot of this factioning and inner monologue and development of characters that people have become so attached to. Now, if you're attached to some characters in the first 2 or 3 books, and then that goes on for 7 whole books, well, that's the fascination. That's why people get so involved and so passionate about the series in general, but in particular Harry Potter, because these are identifiable characters. They stick with you. You feel their highs and their lows. You age with them, so you can actually see them develop as children to adolescents to the end of adolescence to adults, and they do that very well. So that's kind of what's so fascinating about it. It's hard to really put into, especially if you flip it on and happen to catch a few minutes on TV or on Netflix or whatever. It doesn't really make a lot of sense as to why people are so fascinated by it. I think a lot of what the movies 4, 5, and 6 are really about is just reminding everyone, remember when you read this? That was very exciting. Remember when you read this? That was very exciting. But they changed some things to fit the movies and whatnot. Now, what I didn't talk about was number 3. Number 3 is a great book, and it is also the best of the movies. It's put together very well, so you can watch it stand alone and kind of figure out what's going on. They do a really good job of explaining what needs to be explained and whatnot. So if you want to watch a movie start to finish, you watch that one. Still, I don't think you're going to like it that much just because you haven't had this kind of passionate understanding of these kids and these characters rising up through the world. But if you want to start reading one, start with number 3. That's a great one to start at. A lot of people say that's their favorite. Then you can head on up through the books. And if you get tired of number 5 halfway through, you can just quit and start over with 6 and figure out what happened. Not that number 5 is bad, but Harry Potter's like 13 or 14, and he's kind of a jerk. He's like a 13-year-old boy. He's just really, anyways, annoying. And it's written really well. So thank you for the email. I really appreciate that. I'd love to get some followers and some conversation with you guys out on Twitter and an email and everywhere else it happens to be. I've finished reading, I'm going to change topic a little bit. I finished reading 4 books recently. One of them is The Deathly Hallows I finished again. One of them is The Tales of Beedle the Bard. I read through that one again. Another one is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It's one of these books that just illustrates the Harry Potter world and the wizarding world in more depth. It's a nice, fun little read. And the other one is not Harry Potter. It's called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind by Chuck Barris. It is an unauthorized autobiography. It's a fantastic book about the guy who created the dating game and the Gong Show and the Newlywed Game and a whole bunch of other television shows in the 70s. And he writes his own autobiography, and he's just an atrocious character. He's just a hateable human being. He's so dislikable. It's amazing, which makes the book really entertaining. In addition to all that television, he claims that he was a CIA operative throughout his time as a TV producer, and describes that like he'd take the winning couple from the Newlywed Game on he'd be there, take them on a trip to Germany, and he'd go with them. And it was during the Cold War, so he'd go on a honeymoon to some German city, and then he'd sneak off and kill somebody for the CIA, and then come back, and he led this secret double life. And it was a very interesting book. There's a movie too called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, starring Sam Rockwell, one of my favorite actors. Really incredible movie. A lot of liberties were taken with the book and reordering to fit it into this filmic script experience, but it turned out just totally amazing. It's one of the best movies, one of my favorite movies, and a very interesting, great book. So you can check that one out as well. But on to more Potter business. Today's primary topic is Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. So Ron and Hermione are Harry Potter's 2 best friends. They've been with him throughout all the books in the series. They're both his age, and Ron is tall, skinny, redheaded, ginger, gangly kid. Hermione is a bushy-haired, pretty girl who is exceptionally smart and is the brightest witch of her age, as they say. They play a major role in Harry Potter number 7, and they will continue to play a role in the second half, although not as much, honestly. They will play a functional role, so you need to know who they are. Well, Ron is Harry's best friend. Ron and Harry met on the train to Hogwarts on the very first day. They just happened to bump into each other, and then they sat in the same train session, and they became best friends ever since. Hermione, on the other hand, was in their year in school, and so had a bunch of classes with them, and also in their house. So they have these different houses, and so basically 4 mini fraternities, and those are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. And Harry Potter, Ron, and Hermione are all in Gryffindor. And so as they go around and be in classes together, they first find out who Hermione is just because she's super smart. She's always raising her hand and answering questions and being annoying and all that sort of thing. Well, eventually they do befriend her, and she ends up helping them out a lot, and she's quite clever and really saves the day more than once, just a ton of times throughout the series. And so they all become very fast friends. So that's how they met at the beginning. Harry is a really interesting kind of character because his personality, you don't really know it very well. You only know what his personality is because of what other people tell him about himself. So there's a lot of people that say, oh, you're just like your mother, or you're just like your father, you're like this and this. And I guess you can see some of that through his actions, but a lot of the time Harry is more of a neutral character than you would suspect from having a world built around him so passionately. However, Ron and Hermione have very distinct personalities that are interesting. Ron is he's clever and lippy and a jokester. He is kind of depressing sometimes, so he's always got a sarcastic wit, but he's not always the happiest little unicorn that runs around. Sometimes he's a sad, sad flower, a miserable little rain cloud. But he's always very passionate about who he is for, and he's always for Harry. Well, almost always for Harry, and he's a good friend to have around. Hermione, on the other hand, is smarter than her own good. She is clever and logical and absolutely brilliant. Her spell work and her magic is second to none. She's just really fantastic in terms of her ability. Now, that trend is in school, so she gets good grades, but she also just does really great magic, very good spell work. And that's important because not just anybody can do any old magic. You have greater and lesser kind of variations on people's magical ability, which is how you get people like Voldemort and Dumbledore being really powerful wizards and than everyone else. But Hermione is very excellent, especially for someone her age. So now you know who they are, kind of have an idea about what they're all about. They've been with Harry Potter since the beginning. But there was something kind of interesting is why do they matter? I was wondering, why do they matter? Could you do not book 7, but movie 7.2 without Ron and Hermione? Actually, not just to piss off the fans. But they really do matter because in the Harry Potter story, you've got, as explained last time, you've got Harry Potter versus Voldemort. And Voldemort has this really amazing magical power. He's a powerful wizard. He is extremely skilled. He knows a ton about magic. But Harry Potter doesn't have that. He's just a dude. A kid, really. So all of a sudden, his friends really do matter quite a lot because he ends up relying on his friends for a ton of help. And not just help in terms of doing spells, but moral support and good and bad advice and the challenges of growing up and all that sort of thing. So from book 1 on through book 7, we see Harry and Hermione and Ron interacting together and with other people, but primarily those three interacting together as the central triangular crew. And usually what happens is 2 of them will form a base and 1 of them will be crazy or have a bad idea or be off somewhere else. And this constantly rotates kind of throughout the series. Is you get 2 of them who are that base of the triangle who are really solid and know where they're going, and then 1 who's off on his or her own just doing crazy or fighting or something like that. So what ends up happening in terms of how the story is written over the course of the 7 books is when one's off being crazy, the other 2 link in and become closer friends. And what happens is you get to know these characters on a one-on-one basis. Because remember I said the stories are all told from Harry Potter's point of view. And he's relatively neutral. Not totally, but relatively neutral. So you really get to know Ron in the first book. Because at the start of the first book, Hermione is annoying. They're not really that good friends with her. They don't like her that much. So it's just Harry and Ron for the first... maybe the second third of the book or so. They're buddies until chapter 10, and they make another friend, Hermione. In book number 2, it's Harry and Ron again. They're paired up because Hermione gets petrified. She gets not turned into stone, but close to turned into stone. She's still alive, but she's just frozen, and they have to go and save the day. So it's Harry and Ron, yet again, are the base of that triangle where she was kind of off on her own, doing her own thing a little bit. We had these 2 working together. Next, in book number 3, Ron, Hermione, and Harry all have pets as well. And Hermione, this is her first time having a pet. She gets a big cat. Ron's pet is a rat. And Ron accuses Hermione's cat of eating his rat, which didn't really happen, but he still accuses of her. And they get into a massive fight over this whole thing and about being considerate of other people's pets and property and who's friends with who and respect for property and all that sort of thing. And they end up being bitter enemies for a good chunk of the book. Ron and Hermione do. So what happens to Harry is then he ends up hanging out with just one or just the other throughout this big portion of the book, and you see kind of how he's torn between the two. He's dedicated to them as friends, and you get to know them a little better. Then at the end of that one, Ron's laid up in the hospital, so for them to go and save the day, it's just Harry and Hermione together, working together and learning about each other and that sort of thing. So we get to become closer friends with her as well. In book 4, Harry and Ron start fighting. And so Hermione acts kind of as a bridge between them and is one of Harry's best friends when he and Ron are fighting. Then at the end of that second half of the book, Hermione and Ron are fighting, and so Harry and Ron get back together, and Harry and Hermione get together. So you see this triangle kind of effect. Now, book number 4 is where the kind of obsession with Harry Potter really starts in, because not only is it a story of wizards, young wizards, now it's a story of young wizards in love. So there's this miniature love story that starts happening, and it's very innocent and very simple, and it's really easy to identify with because they're in middle school, high school. So you remember liking somebody and not being able to tell them, and they like somebody else, and there's all this confusion and this kind of thing. The movie of number 4 portrays this scene just really, really well. There's a school dance, and some stuff happens at the dance, and people say things, and their feelings get hurt. And at the end of the dance, they go outside on the stairs, and there's just a whole bunch of girls in pretty dresses on the stairs crying. It's just like a high school dance. It's straight out, pulled out of reality, yet it's in that wizarding world. So now we have Ron and Hermione fighting, two of the people you really like because they like each other is why they're fighting. A tie into reality. It's just like high schoolers fighting, so any high schooler, anybody who's had that kind of experience can identify with that sort of situation, even if not in the exact moment. And you have this kind of paired up friendship now between Hermione and Harry, or Ron and Harry, because Hermione and Ron are fighting. Anyways, in number 5, Harry's the one who goes out and gets crazy, and he's acting very strange, so Ron and Hermione get to know each other better. In number 6, Ron gets a girlfriend who's not Hermione, and so they start having a fight, and Harry and Hermione spend more time together. In number 7, at the beginning of number 7, Ron leaves, so they're out on traveling around the countryside, and Ron leaves them, and so Harry and Hermione become closer. Ron returns, and so then there's another bonding and all that sort of thing. So throughout the entire series, it has been written in a way to pair you up with one other person, which makes it really easy to get to know these people and understand who they are and their motivations, and you can kind of predict what they're going to say, much easier than predicting what Harry might say, for example. So that explains why people have been become fascinated and that sort of thing. Also in the movies, Emma Watson is simply a beautiful girl, now a beautiful young woman, and so it is really easy for people, especially to see her in, I think it starts in number 3. She's just a extremely pretty young lady. Plays a very smart, capable, pretty young girl. So I think people really identify with that as well. Not me. I don't identify with a teenage girl, but yeah, I can see why people do that and get involved. So that might explain some of it at least. Now, book number 7. The one there, the movie's coming up. There are a couple of things we got to address with Ron and Hermione. One, we're looking for Horcruxes. Horcruxes are where bits of Voldemort's soul is kept. To find and kill Horcruxes, Harry needs Ron and Hermione's help. So far, they've broken 3 of the Horcruxes. I think they know that they've broken 2. Ron did 1, Harry did 1, and Dumbledore did 1. So we've got a bunch more to find, and we need Ron and Hermione's help. And they have some clues, and they have some ideas about how to do that. And they're going to be central parts of the plan in the future. Next, not only do you have to find him, but you have to destroy him, and that's not easy to do. And so Harry, by bouncing his ideas off of his friends, they're coming up and generating solutions on how to do this. In the movies, that's not that apparent, because the movies, they're just there trying to do events. In the books, you really see how they discuss that and work that out. Again, it goes back to J.K. Rowling's writing. The writing is what's really central. The dialogue doesn't just go back and forth. It progresses the storyline through kind of a looping system where it comes back, they cover some points, they go forward, they go back, cover some points, go forward, and eventually they come to a conclusion and know where to go next. And next we need to go to this location where some event happens that moves the plot along. And then they go back and do dialogue, where they discuss what happened, why it happened, they find some new information, and then they move forward. It's really written very, very well. So there's Horcruxes. The other thing we have with Ron and Hermione is there has been clear tension, romantic tension between the two of them since the third book, maybe even the second, when they were starting to develop crushes. They've never acted on it, but in the previous books, in book 6, they definitely had crushes on each other, and then other things happened. So in book 7, we need to find out, in the end of the movie, we need to find out, will they get together? And spoiler alert, they do, and it's going to be a climactic kiss and everything like that. So in the book, it's done really well. It's very funny the way it's presented. It's in a very serious situation, and Ron's clever sense of humor makes light of it, and everything's delightful. So we'll see how they treat that in the movie, but it's certainly something that Potterheads are looking forward to. Potterheads. Wow, look at the time. That's a whole Bobocast. And I just talked a short while, I feel. Man. Well, that's Bobocast for this week. Read something. Tell me about it at bobocast@gmail.com or at Bobocast on Twitter. It doesn't have to be Harry Potter, but if it is, I'll talk about it. If it's not, I'll probably talk about it. If you're writing a book, you want to sell it, fucking tell me about it. Oh, I've worked really hard not to swear this time. We're going to make this a safe for work podcast, appropriate for all ages podcast. It was very difficult. I hope I didn't let any slip there, but it worked out for you. It worked out for me. Next week, we'll be talking about Snape and Dumbledore, two of the characters who are in the 7th book and 7th movie the least, but who play some of the most important critical roles in the entire story. So we'll have gone through Harry and Voldemort, Ron and Hermione, Snape and Dumbledore, kind of this progression, and then we'll go through and talk about some other elements and whatnot. So with Snape and Dumbledore, there's a lot about how things are written and how the stories are constructed, leaving a lot of mystery and that sort of thing. Listener, I hope I answered your question about why people find it fascinating. That is, a couple of reasons, but maybe there's more. I don't know. If you have more and other reasons, then feel free to write in or tweet at me. If you have thoughts, wishes, secret desires, or need some wizardly advice, feel free to send in an owl or email and just ask me. I've got this week's trivia question for you, and then we'll sign on out. This week's trivia question: who is the Minister of Magic before Cornelius Fudge? So who is that person? I will tell you next time on Bobocast. Take care, everybody.